Okay, sorry about that. Once we get that pedal rack mounted up, now it wants to put the brake pedal way over, so we may have to cut the brake pedal actually and bring it over to where it's close enough to the gas pedal where we're going to be happy. Trim the top of that off, and we got one hole we can kind of work off of. We got to knock those nipples off of that, and then once we get it just self-tapered up there, we can get our holes marked, get it drilled out, and see if we can put our throttle cable in here. We're going to hook up our throttle cable for our throttle body, and was able to get everything roughed in. It is on the motor mounts, and we gotta work on that to get the brake booster off of the other car on it for the pedal rack. And if we gotta make a rod to push that in deep enough to work this setup we already got, we don't want to unhook those brakes. I'm gonna try to use those brakes for now. You know, if we got to do something different, we'll just completely change it off. But I want power brakes, so we got to put the brake booster on it, and I want everything just kind of match this motor so it'll work. Over here, we'll probably be cutting in on that. If we can't already use like that hole, might be able to take that patch and put it over it, but they're side by side. And then you got the hood release coming here, so we might have to cut it, move it over this way some more, or whatever we got to do. But it looks like with this brake booster, you can see that those holes for the body plugs, we got to cut a hole big enough for those to be able to come through and hook up. And it's got a mess of wires, so we may actually end up cutting into that wheel well. Whatever it takes, we're going to cut it out. This is not a low rider, it's a regular truck. We'll cut it out and make a box or whatever it takes to have whatever we need there. If we gotta bend these brake lines and make them look a little janky or whatever until we can figure out a way to do that and bleed that back off. To bleed one of those is a lot, and it's got that ABS stuff on there. You got to power one side of it a certain way to let the proportionary valve work. This is a 5,000 pound truck, so we may eventually change that out. I've got the other pieces, if I can see it here real quickly, to make those brakes work off of the car. But I think the car is like only 5,000 or 3,000, 4,000 pounds, so I don't know if it'll work. It would definitely work the brakes, but I don't know if it'd be strong enough. Hydraulic, I mean, it shouldn't matter, but it might. So we do have it down on the motor mounts, and that's where it's going to be. There's just a little bit of room between the diff and the oil pan. We've got enough room to change the oil, and that's all we got. Now it's getting roughed in. All this will just have like a tack wheel holding it or whatever. Then we'll take it apart, weld it out solid, just solid. Even this or whatever, we'll have to figure out if we're going to put a dog box on it or whatever. But I've got the fuel lines laying here, and you know, I'm gonna try to see if I can take and use this and maybe swell these out enough to slide them over there and braze them to what we already got. That's the method to the madness. You know, it's already got a line here coming in. Right here is your fuel lines. But first things first, we got to get this brake booster cut out or whatever we got to do to make it fit. Once we get the brake pedal hung and the gas pedal in, so we can hook up our throttle cable, we'll start bolting all this up, hooking the wires up, hooking the fuel lines up, and hopefully we can keep the brakes the way they are. So that's almost gonna be, it's gonna be a lot like the motor mounts were. This one was just so tight, and you know, it's just got I welded it up solid on the bottom, then I put a cap on it, and it's got a real heavy tack there. Obviously that needs dressed up, we can do that. And then this motor mount, it was a lot, and it was a lot to get it to where the starter would fit and the intake to go on the motor. So we got to hook all this up, and I'm gonna try to bust it off if we can get the fuel line's hooked up to a toggle switch to where we can turn on a fuel pump. I think that fuel pump's strong enough. If not, we'll switch it out with another one out of the other original thing. And we're going to try to hook up the fuel lines. We're just going to bring them over the motor, you know, in a way to, you know, they're going to be off the exhaust or whatever. I was even thinking about maybe hooking up the fuel lines and hooking up the original gas tank in the back seat for now, to see if we can get it to run under its own power, evap all the wires, and then hook it up a different kind of way. It's so small that it would set right where the back seats were, you know, but I don't know. We'll see. I'm gonna try to use all the stuff we got already and use the original tank because it's got a bigger tank. But you know, to hook up the evap, it's got to have that in order to make it do its thing. The fuel vapors is what makes the evap work and run at low RPM traffic, whatever, you know. So it's got to be on there. We'll cobble some lines or whatever it takes to hook everything up as far as radiator, hopefully, and then we'll hook up the exhaust and all that too. So the motor is down on the motor mounts, and we've got room for a starter, intake, and hopefully we can start hooking stuff up now. And we'll see where we're at. Motor plate was solid. Rest of it might be a little janky looking, but it'll be solid, and it'll be welded and spray painted and seam sealed once we get it to where we can take it apart and put it back together easily enough. To get that motor out, you know, I don't know, with those motor mounts the way they are, you may actually have to unbolt them from the block, and that was something that I definitely wanted to have to do. You know, you can take it up, but you risk breaking stuff. But to slide that motor back out there and do all that, it's a lot. And I'm thinking I might have to take the motor mounts off of the block and take them out and then be able to slide it forward. So it's a lot, but it's on there, okay? And then we can start hooking stuff up. Next thing's next, we got to get this gas pedal and brake assembly with the brake booster and get room for the wiring harness to come through. We're going to start hooking stuff up. Rough fit, obviously, until we can get it all koshered and tidied up. We're going to just spray paint. We'll weld it out solid and make stuff to where we can take it apart and work on it if necessary with the factory stuff. I'll have to scab the fuel lines together some kind of way. I could actually probably even get enough room out of there if they might plug up. If I could get in there and bend it with a wrench or whatever and get it situated in a way so we might be able to just plug that up and use the factory stuff. You just take those lines off. They look the same size to me. So you plug one up, and if you bend that one out enough, maybe you can plug two of them together if we have to braze something together. That's not out of my skill set. We can do that. But try to use the factory stuff, quick connect, just like it is factory. So we're still plugging. I'm going to try to make this exhaust to where I can unplug or unbolt this manifold and unbolt it down here. So it's, you know, I can work on it. If I got to replace the motor, whatever it is, I want it to be on work on it. So it's a mess. It's a lot of blah, blah, blah. I made a lot of little videos that won't upload. You know, it just won't upload. But we got to pull all this back out of here. And right there's the brake booster I'm going to put in it. We got to pull all this back out of here. I pulled it out, put it in. It took me like 5-6 times to get that motor mount in. And it took like 2-3 days to get that. So if we can get this today or the next day, you know, we got to get those nuts off of it. Right there. Get that out. And then we're going to start with this hole here and make it a center mark or whatever. And then we'll trim to cut to fit to get that brake pedal there on it and get the gas pedal on it so we can hook up the throttle cable for the manifold. It's saying a lot. And you know, I need room in here in case I need to work on that line that comes in there for the whatever. So it's something that has to be done, and then you got to obviously be able to hook everything up and be able to have enough room to work on it. So we're going to try to put the heat box back in it too and make it work too. The factory heat box, if we got to cut a back part out of it or whatever, I'd like to keep this to where I could work on it. Definitely going to have enough room for these bolts around the top, and then that hose. And if you could make a dog box that would just kind of go up there, and we could self-tap it in, and then once we get it apart, take nuts and weld to the backside and bolt a dog box in. You know, to do all that with the heater box and stuff, we can keep it simple enough to work on it to where it wouldn't be too much. We'll do it, because right here's the heat box that I want to use, and it's got cables. You know, you can just slide it over and turn it on some kind of way, preferably with the switch on the dash, to where we can use some of that, like the heater control. It'd just be for like heat and defrost, and then I wanted to be able to use the plugs, and we'll have to put that instrument cluster in there. Hopefully we can get some of that to work, and obviously we got to use all that. But the four-wheel drive will be like some kind of cable shift or something if we can eventually get it done. It's saying a lot. I'm wore out. I'm tired. But we're going full swing on it. We're going to try to get it to where we can at least pull under its own power. Just a cheap little transmission controller to where we can move it around. At least we get that much done. We'll keep plugging on it. It'll be a lot of blah, blah, blah. Okay? So bear with me.